Well, actually,
How are you?
gotta be, but that's.
Grumpy?
Oh, I know, I had.
Okay, well, join the crowd.
Yeah, I did FLCCO.
That's true, there you go.
Okay, well, I think you're good now.
Okay. Now I am really fine with that.
The pack.
I'll talk to them.
Yeah, you got easier FLCC.
It just.
Oh, okay.
Somebody, but you never know.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay.
Hey, you got the gavel? That's pretty cool. First time in 2 years and 5 months.
I didn't bring my cord because I didn't know if there would be
For this meeting, like all the whole pack.
Well, the tablet, I screwed up too, so I should have just brought my tablet from the other side.
Yeah.
because he said they were getting down there. And at some point.
Oh, it's an iPad.
So he's
Good.
gonna touch base with you.
Thank you.
Hello.
You are
I'm
in.
Owen.
Oh,
Your password.
It's like,
Good.
because I have that.
Oh, is that a question or a question? Is that a question or a touchdown?
I scored a touchdown. Now I'm gonna go for the 2-point conversion. There it is.
That's good.
Who's the guardian?
I'm gonna go through this. You or somebody in the department.
Someone must have.
That's not, don't worry about this. I got it. You don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
Answer that later. For the final.
Looks like someone would be nice right away, so that's good.
Well, except I'm not in the trustees.
Trustees.
Yeah, so, I'll sign it.
Thank you.
Where are you trying to get?
Others that
Please do
that.
I know, that's what I.
All of their material.
That's what I.
Yeah, it looks like it's not connecting right off the
She used to
bat.
be on the internet.
What is the trustees website? Oh,
Hey, Jeff.
Just, I mean, this is just Safari, so at the webpage. Just.
Yeah.
Oh, if you type in FLCC. Well, I didn't know it was on.
Oh, on the side?
Yeah.
No, not when it's pulling it up from there. That's,
It's okay.
I know,
That was
it's so,
problem was.
scroll through.
This is what you did. Oh, page 5? Is that
Somebody else.
agenda? Page 203? Is that agenda? Page 2?
Now,
Is that agenda? Always move my place.
Yeah, talk, you can.
Yeah. But it was like, I'll see it.
Should be
so
a little
difficult. It was giving me.
Shut down. With a 300.
So that's why I said, well, I'm just gonna leave it open.
That's why I sent that email and perhaps break it down.
Well, Saturday, do that?
Right, yes.
I mean, this is just the intranet landing.
Oh, there's nobody to see.
So I think I'll share.
Yeah.
They said they went out to dinner Tuesday night.
Okay. And then when it's time, I'll just the shutter.
Who was shuttered?
But you know what?
Okay, yeah, oh, okay.
Got it?
Thank you.
It's
Did you end up getting one that time?
Yeah, actually, once I got on the internet, the button for the trustees
Was right there.
showed up.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I was just having the trouble with her, that same button, so I'm glad yours is working. Maybe that's why.
So if I'm looking at it.
Well, if you have a login thing that you usually
Awesome.
Okay, so if you end up going to your top, you just type in FLCC intranet, and it'll bring you to the website. And there'll be a button that says access. Press it, and you just log in with that, you should be good.
Okay.
I tried.
Yep, yeah, you need that.
Don't worry about it, I think I can bring it up on my phone. It'll be fine. And I have allergies. I have to bring this.
You gotta bring this forward, so welcome. Apple's all yours.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, can everybody hear? This is something new for all of us, using the mics and everything. Are they on?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay. Yes? All right. Welcome, everybody. Do we have a quorum? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We need
And
one more.
Steve's supposed to be
Steve's supposed to be
WebExing
WebExing
But
in.
I don't think he's WebExing until 5.
Oh.
So
we should be okay because we don't do the consent agenda.
agenda until the regular meeting. All right, then George, I'm going to turn it over to you. Penny has asked that when you speak, to make a motion or do something like that, that you please speak into the mic so that she won't have a hard time hearing you. All right? Okay, George, take it away.
All right. Welcome and call to order the Education and Planning Committee meeting for August 3rd, 4:30 p.m. First order of business is the review of the minutes. Are there any additions, corrections, concerns? Hearing none, we'll move on to the enrollment update with Dr. Urbatus.
Afternoon, everybody. Okay, so you have the enrollment update as of July 22nd for summer and fall. The summer numbers reflected are the final summer numbers. And in regard to fall, based on last Friday's enrollment update on July 29th, our overall enrollment is at 0.4% for head count, which is a decline from the 3.2% on July 22nd, and 1.8% FTE, which is a decline from the 3.6% on July 22nd. So I'll stop and see if you have any questions about that before I move on to the community college summary from the 2020-21 SUNY annual report.
So we had a drop between last week.
We did.
So people have withdrawn or?
It reflects registrations based on subpopulation. So I can tell you that. So based on last Friday, new student enrollment is up 9%. Transfer student enrollment is up 44%. Continuing student enrollment is down 1.9%. returning student enrollment, and those are students who previously attended the college and left, and would be coming back. That is down 27.1%. And dual enrollment, which is non-Gemini, those would be students, high school students taking credit courses at one of our locations, is down 17%. Small n though for that, 53 versus 44 for 2022. So we are registering through almost the end of August. Classes begin the last week of August. I'm hoping that we will return to an academic calendar that starts after Labor Day, which always bodes better for us, but it is what it is for this year. Okay, I'll move on to the 2020-21 SUNY Community College Annual Report. I thought you would find it to be of interest what the student FTE comparison was for that year. We receive this report on an annual basis, and there's always a year's lag, just as a point of information. So when you look at the student FTE comparison for the 29 community colleges, we ranked first with a 1.9% enrollment decline. Cayuga ranked last with a 23% enrollment decline. The average enrollment decline for the 29 community colleges was a little over 13%. So we did very well. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abay. Moving along to the student success update. Ms. Whitman. There she is.
All right, thank you. Okay. Oh, all right. Well, thank you all for letting me come to present to you again on today's student data and trends to support retention efforts. I know you have this in your packet as well. Okay, there we go. This presentation may look somewhat familiar to those who attended the Education Subcommittee in June, but we've been able to refine the data and trends, and we'll provide some new information at the end. As you know, we've been working on using student data collected from various areas, thank you, to begin to build a student risk profile. Our intention is to then connect this risk profile to different tools, both technological and personnel, to help students overcome or mitigate those risks and still find educational success. One area we found initial data on was the academic and financial aid standing process. Just a quick reminder about these processes. In the academic side, after a student fails to obtain a required GPA, the student goes on academic probation. At the end of the next term they're enrolled, he or she can either return to good standing, stay on probation, or be academically dismissed. A similar process for financial aid. Students go on warning at the end of the next term. Their aid is either returned or suspended. And if suspended, the student can appeal. However, appeals must meet a narrow threshold set by the federal government and New York State to be approved. We were aware of this process, but it wasn't until this past term when we were really able to see how many students this was impacting. And what we found was that in the continuing probation, those students who were on probation for one term and then making academic progress, 119 of them fell into that category after the spring term. 113 of those students, however, lost their financial aid. They were suspended. Now, yes, some of them can appeal, and we're working on those matters and can provide those to you later, but it's helpful that all 113 would get them back. And we know that most of our students need their aid to be enrolled, so we had to start looking at our systems and determining what traits we can identify earlier. And we see that most of the time, our academic and financial aid numbers are looking the same. The trend is not going one way or the other, even after implementing the academic recovery plan a few years ago. So we know that a quarter of our students that go on academic probation are in their first term. They're not re-enrolling for a second term. So we started to dig into that data differently. Of that group, half of them, more than half, a little more than half, are actually receiving all Fs or a combination of F and Ws. And when we started drilling down even more, we see that there's a correlation perhaps with the time they're registering, with whether or not they're Pell eligible, and we keep looking at different data points. But looking at data is only one piece of it. And we know that we had to also start looking at our systems. What could we possibly do differently to start looking at making a difference earlier? So we started asking ourselves some of these questions. And what came out of those conversations was that we know students who register closer to the start of the term in their first term are struggling. So to that end, we started a new program just 2 days ago, on Monday, in which we are tagging ahead of time these first term students differently. And we have a group of folks who are reaching out to them who are struggling. Maybe they don't have their FAFSA already filed, or they're struggling with getting transportation, or they're taking all online classes, but their new student intake form says that they don't have internet at home. So we're starting to do some concierge service to this group and work with them earlier. Literally, yesterday we started this program. Next, we're going to tweak some of the flags in our Starfish process so that we have more actionable items to follow up with. Adding a few flags, maybe instead of saying recommend course withdrawal, maybe it's the student stopped attending and we get a date on when the student last showed up. We also know that there's other areas that we can really start to alert students to what's happening earlier and on campus. So we're going to leverage the FYE and FY classes with stand-up programs about timely care, about tutoring services, about student lingo, things that we know students don't always realize they have until perhaps it's too late. And we also know that we have to do a better job communicating about our various services, especially about probation, financial aid warning, and the processes at the end of the term. So we'll start looking at how are we talking to students about withdrawing from classes, about withdrawing from a class or the whole term differently, and that Megan Kenner-Connect from the Director of Financial Aid and I are really talking about our communication and making sure our language is better aligned so students understand what's happening. And our back end is getting much more sophisticated thanks to our friends in ACPI for the huge lift that they've already created. We're starting this dashboard that shows different interventions and different data points that we're collecting that will help us identify those trends and traits that students may have for not being successful. And so what's next? Well, we're going to communicate what we've been doing, starting with opening days to the faculty and staff. We're going to be working with ACPI to evaluate what we're doing and seeing what measures have been impactful. And then we're going to continue to revise our systems and then repeat it all again until we can make that needle move and keep more students on the path to success at Finger Lakes. And so with that, I will entertain any questions.
Sarah, since we lose most of the kids that first semester, do we have any way of, do you see their high school transcripts when they come in?
We
I
should.
know we have to take everybody, so.
Right, we should. That's
Yeah.
one of the key indicators that we're measuring for August is were the high school transcripts on file. Because we believe that there might be a correlation. If the transcripts aren't on file, they might not be getting into the right classes. So we're measuring that.
The other questions for Sarah? This is good stuff. I mean, we're identifying indicators early and we're taking action on them. Just kudos.
The dashboard has been a huge impact to Deborah and Chris Baldoni and that staff to help us put together actionable reasonable data that we can look at and make some action has been tremendous.
And I'm sure there'll be even new things we'll discover as we go along, so that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
While you're there,
I know, I was gonna say, policies, right?
talk about the immunization policy.
Sure. So the immunization policy, I don't think so, no. I guess, we are revising it based on guidance. What you have, is a revision of a revision of a revision. I think this is about the 4th time we're trying to revise it to stay up to date. Based on SUNY guidance, boosters are not required any longer to remain enrolled in face-to-face classes. That's one major shift, but we are aligning our systems to alert students earlier in the process so that MMRs and COVID line up because it gets hard to message to students if things are kind of all over with different deadlines. So that's the big one. And the exemption process has been clarified and cleaned up, having gone through it for a whole year now. We know a little bit more sophisticated questions to ask. So those are the big differences, but it is aligning to SUNY, and it is already kind of in action and has been working very successfully.
Any questions from the board? It was pretty clearly laid out, and we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. Nothing further?
Academic grievance?
You can, what we'll do, we'll just keep you there,
Okay.
and we'll go right to the academic grievance policy.
Sure. So the academic grievance adjustments were minimal, although this is one of the policies that we do look at an annual basis. It was through our academic Senate process. It was reviewed and approved. And so it's really cleaning language up, making sure systems, dates are aligned with the rest of the institution and or other policies. So we really just cleaning things up this past year.
And any questions from the board? Great, Sarah, you're really helping us out here, so
Anything, keep on track.
keep on going.
Yeah.
So the student code of conduct?
Right, the student code of conduct is another annual policy that we ask you to review. As you know, it's quite lengthy. Very few adjustments that were substantial, much more aligning to language, timelines, and as we go through cases, we often will note small adjustments we need to make, and so those were made. It also went through the academic Senate process and was vetted and approved, endorsed at that May meeting as well.
Any questions on the student code of conduct on the board? Articulated it well.
Excellent.
Here we go. We will now look at the revised agreement between FLCC and the College Association. Dr. Urbatus.
Oh, Cassie. Hi. Cassie, sit down. I'm so excited to get
You'll get your turn.
Sorry, guys, I'm sitting down.
That's right, we're getting our steps in. Who can complain about that?
Hello again. So in your packet is the updated revised agreement based on Dr. Nye's review and our conversation. You have a tracking change version as well as a clean version, which I personally find much easier to read. Not significant changes, predominantly changes to titles, some obsolete language as well as operational changes that needed to be reflected accurately. So I'll ask if you have any questions in regard to the agreement.
Questions? Again, that's been well laid out. We appreciate it.
Good, and before I close, I'd like to introduce our new Executive Director of the FLCC Association, Lindsay Chamberlain, who is with us this evening. Lindsay comes to us from the University of Rochester, where she served in the president's office. And prior to that, she was at Alfred University in admissions, enrollment management. So, welcome, Lindsay.
Cassie. The agreements between the FLCC and the counties.
This resolution comes through every year. It is required by state ed and SUNY that we create an agreement with the counties that we service beyond Ontario County. And so it's for Chemung, Seneca, Steuben, Wayne, and Yates. This would go out to them to create an official agreement. Any questions?
Questions from the board? Thank you. And moving on to non-unit employee reappointments. Ms. Palaucha.
Good afternoon. In your packet, you have a memo and a resolution to approve non-unit employee reappointments for 2022, 2023 year. We have performance evaluations on file for those employees, and we're recommending their reappointment, and you have the list of employees. I'll take any questions about that.
Any questions? Everybody did read the package. Want to move on to the revisions to the management confidential handbook?
Certainly, yes, you have a memo and resolution in your packet to approve changes to the management confidential handbook. There are 3 changes noted. One is to reflect with health insurance that the plan is no longer under the consortium and is direct with Excellus, as well as management confidential employees' option of participating in the high deductible health plan. And we've removed the language from previous years that noted a salary increase related to changes in the health plan that had been implemented at that time. There are 2 new changes as well. We've added paid parental leave section to mirror our recent contractual improvement that we implemented with the professional association. And this will allow for 10 days of paid parental leave. And then in the merit pay section, we've adjusted the amount from $15,000 to $30,000 in that fund, which will allow us to have the flexibility to do lump sums and or to have the flexibility to provide recognition in the form of merit pay awards. Any question on those changes?
There's none.
Next one. Finally, I have a memo and resolution in your packets to approve new and revised titles. There are 2 new titles. One is Senior Human Resources Generalist. And this is not a new headcount, and no new funds are required in the budget. And this title is being created to differentiate roles within the department for career progression. And there's a new title being created within the Center for Student Wellbeing. It will be the Senior Director for the Center for Student Wellbeing. And this is to implement a new structure for 2 offices that were combined last fall into one location to better deliver those services to students from one location. And we're implementing a structure to integrate those two offices together.
Any questions from the board? Okay, thank you. We'll move to strategic thought presentations, starting with alumni and development. Noche.
Hi, everyone. Rich Palio is joining us tonight to do part of this. One of the reasons why we work together as a team every day in advancement, and I think it's important for her to be here and talk about intricate details. Before we start, it's great to see everyone in person. It's been a long time since we've gathered like this in a different venue, but it's different for us to all be here. And I actually got out a necktie today. First time in a long time. Got a lot of compliments today, but so I was forced to. So we had a really successful year. We can't wait to talk about it. There we go. So before we get started, here were our goals, and they were very simple. And we could go into gross detail about our goals, but we just figured we wanted to increase everything that we were doing at least just a little bit. And here are the results. So we have now officially completed our first and second largest fundraising years in college history, finishing 2% ahead of last year. I think that the thing that's impressive about this, for y'all to know, a little bit behind the scenes, we did $10,000 in small gifts in the last 10 days of the fiscal year. It was impressive. It was exciting. And it is the way the fourth quarter of a fiscal year should work. It was something that was well planned and well documented, and we were very pleased in that. Donors, obviously, a 4% increase. New donors, a 15% increase. And here's the stat we're most proud of, is the 120% increase in alumni giving. And this is a really, really good marker for the future. So those are the broad stats. And now Bree is going to walk you through the opinions.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, so this is a lot of information and a lot of, key details here, but I'll just draw your attention to 2022. As Louis said, we're really proud of our efforts this year. This is not just reflective of the advancement division. This is really reflective of a very successful, respected college and a very lucrative community. So I commend all of you for the success that we've seen. So we've seen a percentage uptick in everything for this year. So we're really proud of our donor number, our total revenue, obviously, we're super happy about that. Total gifts continues to stay steady. I'll just point to our overall donor retention number, which came way back up percentage-wise to 48.9% this year. And then new donors, as Louis had emphasized, it's really hard to acquire new donors. So we're really proud of having brought that back up. And then finally, down at the bottom, obviously our living alumni number continues to grow at a very rapid rate, which is really good news for us. We want to continue to grow that number and graduate more students, but it also makes our job very difficult when it comes to raising our percentage of alumni giving. So the alumni giving rate is just the percentage of alumni who are donating, but as you can see, our total alumni dollars is up quite significantly. So again, we're very proud of all these numbers.
Before we move on, I'll just add, and we'll take some questions. There's a lot of data. The living alumni number it's an issue in all higher education. Bree and I used to live this life at different kinds of institutions where it became really a big factor in all levels of our practice. That's the denominator. Like she said, we cannot control that. That's a good thing that we're graduating people, but that's a battle we fight every year, and it's hard to when we're trying to build something to keep pace with that. So any questions? These are a lot of numbers, a lot of things. Any questions for either of us?
There's a big bump this year. I just wondered, was there a major gift in the total alumni giving?
There was a large gift, but not, even if you subtract, and I want to say large, it was under 20,000. It was, if we subtracted that, Bree, correct me if I'm wrong, that would have still been our largest alumni giving total.
Yep.
Right.
Yes, we did have one major gift that was about 20,000, and then all of the rest are like small donors that have.
Do you think that big gift will repeat or just was a special?
We hope so.
We hope so.
That's our goal.
Good.
Any other questions?
Lewis, one, just, it appears that the average gifts rate, the dollar amount per donor seems to be going up. Is there some efficiencies there? Can you talk about that a little?
I'll address that if you don't mind.
Okay.
In all of our efforts, we always try to do a percentage increase when we ask for year-over-year contributions. So, you know, one of the methods that we use is we have like this ladder system where we take a list of donors who gave last year and maybe you gave it $100, and then we would increase that by increments of 25, 50, 75% when we ask again this year. So every solicitation usually includes 3 ask amounts, so that's always sort of part of our effort is to increase gift totals year over year. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily working. I would have to dig into the data to see if people are actually increasing their gifts, but according to what we're seeing here, it does look like our average gift totals are increasing.
Yeah, communication, that's really positive.
Anything else? Okay, Bree, take this one.
Yeah, so this is just a compilation of some of the ways that we've utilized the funds that we've raised over the last 1 to 3 years to provide support back to FLCC. After all, our mission is to support the FLCC campus, so we're really excited to have increased these numbers year over year as well. So over 88,000 in student emergency support. That's the biggest year we've had. Providing support for FLCC students who are facing emergency hardship. Scholarships, same thing, that's the most we've ever contributed to scholarships. Salaries, these are for positions that are grant funded through funds provided through the foundation. Miscellaneous expenses, that includes a lot of different little things, but an example would be like equipment for the viticulture center. And then capital improvements is our contribution to the Sand Center, which is an annual amount, and then a contribution to the Mueller Field Station.
Questions? Okay, wanted to talk to you about our engagement efforts, and we did this very deliberately to express how we've started so far and the building that's happening. So that first event there, that Young Lion happy hour, and this is just your old school, everyone meet at a bar, have a drink, everyone interact. That was the first in-person alumni event we've done in 3 years. And then you see the baseball alumni game 11, but I think the last 3 are important. We did an engagement survey because we want to know how our alums want to be engaged. And we had very, very, very good response. We were very satisfied with that. The Laker Magazine class notes, 84 submissions. That's an impressive number. And then finally, the wine tasting event that we just had last week. There was 51 people registered. And every single person that attended that event said the same thing. I've never been in this building. I've always driven by and wondered. And we strategically placed food in the winemaking room so they could see what we've all seen, because it feels like a rocket ship in there. So there was a real strategic sense of what we're doing and what we're building, and we're hopeful that this trend will continue. Bree, you have this one?
Yep. So these are just some of the solicitations and the ways that we acquired all of the funds that we raised over the past year. This is not all inclusive of every effort, but I tried to just categorize these in the buckets where we think the most, the biggest bang for our buck type of thing. With the exception of the Laker magazine, which doesn't always have the best return, but it is one of our like fundamental publications that goes to every alum and every member, you know, everybody who's sitting here. And it's less of a solicitation and more of a, you know, general publication engagement opportunity, but it does generate funds. And the other, I'll just point out that, you know, we know in marketing and in fundraising that it takes about 7 touch points for someone to take an action. So even though this is the way these particular donors have indicated that they've wanted to make their donation, it doesn't necessarily represent the success of each of these components, if that makes sense.
I think that the thing I'll add to this, and it's something I've said for a long time, Bree and I are in agreement in our practices. It's a symphony, right? It's one thing can motivate one person at one time. Sometimes we don't know what's going to work, but the symphony is going on behind the scenes all the time, giving folks opportunity to invest in the college. Any questions about this? We wanted to talk about what we have coming up. The Sand Center ribbon cutting, scholarship dinner, which will be the first time in 3 years that we've had that. So connecting our donors with our students, we're excited. We're doing a Red Wings game in a private area at the stadium. First time we've ever done it. It will, I'm just gonna tell the script right now, it will sell out. I mean, we have a limited amount of space, so it's good for us to say things are sold out. Golf ball drop on the 22nd, and Giving Tuesday will be probably a little more aggressive this year than previous years. 70 people, is that the number for Sands?
Yep.
So 70 people have already RSVP'd?
Yes.
Correct. So we've had good response from that, we're still with that. So these are our goals for next year. And I'll point out that they're aggressive. We feel like we have momentum, and goals are there to be obtained, and we put a great deal of intellectual thought in how we arrive at these numbers. I'll give you the increased alumni getting, and Bree, you could maybe piggyback off this. You might say, Louis, Bree, 1%. That would turn into, if we increased our alumni getting by 1%, 200 some odd,
290.
290 donors, alumni donors we would add. So we feel that's aggressive. But we feel like, you know, we want to try to hit those big numbers. So we are very optimistic, even already in this first month of the fiscal year. We've had some success. So we are very optimistic of where we're going to go this year. Even already, early indications are good. So, are there any questions about anything we've talked about for either of us?
Questions from the board? All very positive.
I just like to say one thing, please. I'm on the foundation board, and I have seen Louis and Bree work very hard to, you know, year after year. It's not something that you can build overnight. You know, it takes a long time, and I'm very appreciative of what they've done, and Bree, good luck. We'll see you in January. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you.
Next, Dr. Orloff. We missed you last meeting.
Yes, it's good to be back. Go ahead. Stay here for a minute. Oh. It's prejudiced against short people.
Tall people too.
Tall people, right? Exhausting. Okay. Hi, everyone. Great to be back. Thanks for bearing with me as I couldn't be here at our last meeting when we were supposed to go over this. We do have a really full agenda this time around, and so in consultation with Dr. Nye, I'm going to do a more focused update and sort of hit some of our big highlights. As you know, I've been here, you know, well, really 4 times a year, but 2 times a year, really digging into metrics, and we have a lot of metrics in our strategic plan. So you have all all of them in the packet. And I'm happy to answer any questions on any of the ones in there if you have a particular question. But I'm going to hit some highlights for us today and cover sort of the bigger scope aspects of each of our objectives. And then I'll be back to talk with you in a couple of months for another strategic plan update as we start to close out this strategic plan and get ready for our next strategic plan, which Dr. Nye will start to talk about, in fact, today in his update. So I think that actually that will work well, especially with this being a little delayed with me having been ill at our last meeting. So that's the plan. So we're going to start with objective 1. Just to remind everyone, we look at retention and persistence in objective 1. Next slide. So our major issue, our major metric here looks at retention. At this time of year, we look at fall to spring. Later in the year, we'll look at fall to fall. And our fall to spring retention, as you know, took a tiny hit during COVID, not too shockingly. But as you'll see now, is basically back up to our average, or is very close back up to our average over time. And that's going to be a trend that you're going to hear me say a few times, that we have some COVID impact that we definitely can see in our strategic plan, or we see the impact beginning to recede. As COVID is not fully gone yet, and the strategic plan is also still in effect, I think that's going to be part of our conversation throughout the year as we close out the strategic plan, as well as we prepare for our next strategic plan, because there is no question that COVID has had an impact both on this strategic plan, but also on strategy in higher education. And that's sort of the bigger concept here that we'll need to think about with our next strategic plan. Then looking more specifically at retention rates, not too shockingly and not different than any other time we've talked about retention together, students who are matriculated are retained at a much greater rate than students who are not matriculated. That's not actually necessarily something we need to be particularly worried about. Students who are here for continuing education oftentimes are really just here for continuing education. They're not necessarily here to be retained. They're here to take a class or two. So we're not necessarily concerned about that number, but it's important to sort of point out because it affects the overall statistic, right? From here on out, I'm going to point out a couple of subpopulations. We're only looking at matriculated students, so we take out that continuing ed. Okay, so one of the things that we have noticed about is, one of the things that we've noticed about all students is that we're seeing more fall students retained in fall 21. And this is one of those issues where we had some COVID issues and we're beginning to come out of it, right? We're beginning to see that COVID had an impact and we're coming back into retention. One of the trends that we've noted multiple times and we've talked about a few times here as we've looked at our strategic plan is we have students of color are retained at a lower rate than our white students. But I think it's also really important, and you've heard me say this before, to contextualize this within the national data and really within the New York State data. This is something we want to work on at FLCC because we're striving to serve all of our students equitably, but we're actually doing really well with this statistic when we look at it nationally. So when we look at it nationally, we're doing great. Okay, awesome. Now, how can we do even better? And that's how we need to take these data. And this is, of course, part of our DEI plan as well. Looking at that further, in particular, when we drill down with these data, our students who are African American are retained within that population of students of color at a lower rate than other students of color. Again, these are starting points for improvement. Contextualized, we're doing really well. When we look at national data or we look at New York State data, we're above the trend, not below the trend. So good, and now how can we do that? The other thing that is important to note is we are actually improving on this statistic, but it's not yet equitable. We're reaching for equity. We want our students of color to be retained at the same rate as our white students, but we are seeing an improvement. So from a strategy perspective, we set out to make an improvement. We're seeing our strategy work, but we're not yet at equity. So our strategic plan has had an impact, but we still have work to do. And nationally, we can contextualize that with we're ahead of the trend, but we don't need to be satisfied with that yet for us. Okay, so within objective 1, in addition to retention, we also look at persistence, which is referred to sometimes in graduation numbers and sometimes in completion being at the course level, and graduation, of course, being multiple courses or over the course of the degree. As you've heard me say before, it's really important at the community college that we look at multiple iterations of graduation, right? Most of our students do not come here with the intention of finishing in 2 years, right? So we look at 100%, that's 2 years, 150%, that's 3 years, and 200%, that's 4 years. This is definitely a number that we saw COVID impact, and we will likely continue to see COVID impacted because that time period, in particular those 2 years where we had a lot of COVID impact, took a toll on students' course-taking patterns. And one of the things that we see in particular here is we saw a lot of students choosing to take fewer classes. So they dropped from full-time to part-time, or they had fewer FTE. And that means that their journey is going to look different and their completion path is going to look different. And we see that playing out in these numbers to some degree. However, we also are beginning to see, and this is more clear here, we're beginning to see some uptick in the 200%. So again, some improvement coming out of COVID, but we need to continue to look at these numbers and we need to see how that's going to play out. Okay, moving on to course completion. The other way that we look at persistence is at the course level. So one of the things that we have noticed, and again, this is particularly a COVID era, is that spring completion rates have been better than fall completion rates. So this is essentially statistically a self-selection error. So what that means is the students that Sarah was just talking about, those first term students who are struggling, they're not with us in the spring. So the students who are there in the spring are stronger students to begin with. So we have more students completing in the spring. So really what that tells us is we need to double down on those first term students in the fall, right? So it's actually reinforcing data that we don't necessarily see here, but when we put it together with a different picture, it makes more sense. Now, what I would also tell you, and I know you've heard me say this a lot, and I've already said it like 1,700 times in the last 5 minutes, is all of our course completion, all of our course journey data is so impacted by COVID because students were taking classes in different modalities than they necessarily would have chosen. They were doing different jobs than they necessarily would have chosen. Everyone's lives were upended. Course completion data are things we really have to continue to look at as we come out of COVID and continue to drill down on. Not shared here, but one of the things we look at a lot is course completion by modality. And I just have been looking at some very interesting data that is showing us that we're seeing a lot of improvements in course completion online over a 5-year trend. And that likely does have to do with the fact that both faculty and students are becoming more comfortable with the online. It's not necessarily on par with face-to-face, but we're seeing improvements. So these are things that are all being impacted by the COVID story, that haven't yet fully played out. There is no question that this strategic plan was heavily impacted and is in and itself a sort of COVID strategic plan. And we have to remember that as we look at these metrics, as we think through these metrics, and as we think through what they tell us about our next strategy. Okay, looking at objective 2, meeting the needs of underserved populations. Certainly there are lessons from objective 1 as we go into objective 2, but we have distinct objectives in objective 2 that we want to take a look at and look at how we're tracking. First one is looking at adult students ages 24 and older, a steady increase over the last 5 years. This is one of the most successful metrics in this strategic plan. When we break this down further, we also see that a lot of these students are joining us in online and other remote formats. So that is an interesting lesson about flexibility and the importance of flexibility for the adult student population. But it's not purely that, and the efforts that have come out of enrollment management and the academic and student affairs division to better meet the needs of that particular population are clearly evident in this overall metric. This the proportion of first generation students has just really remained quite consistent. We're not seeing a lot of difference in this. Proportion of students with disability has very steadily increased. It's still overall, a smaller percentage, but you have heard me say many times as we've talked about this number that this is a highly underreported number and a challenging statistic. This is only students who officially report with an official diagnosis. And one of the things that we're seeing is while the number is going up, and it's going up nationally, the national numbers on this absolutely back up our experience at FLCC. What we hear from our students is a bigger story around disability than what our numbers are showing. And that's something that we need to continue to work on so that we can continue to capture it better in order to make better data-driven decisions. The proportion of employees of color has remained consistent at 6% for the last 3 years. And that's also interesting, again, COVID story in a time period where we have a challenging employment environment. We've had consistency, and that I think is an important piece to point out. Moving on to objective 3, meeting the needs of high demand sectors in our region. One of the areas that we have talked about over several years is the connections between non-credit and credit. So that's students who are coming into the non-credit side and having formal articulation of what they do on the non-credit side into the credit side. The project that's currently being worked on right now is the Amazon Web Services, and that's in progress. There are 2 of those credentials are already available and therefore reflected in these numbers, and 2 more are in progress. That's a quite exciting project to hear about because students who work on that AWS can walk into quite high-paying jobs just with that certification that they get on the non-credit side, but it automatically translates into our computer science degree. Another area that we have been looking on is 21st century skills and increasing the hours. You'll see here a number of the different areas that we've been increasing the curriculum and hours available. And that has been in progress. We did have pauses for several, particularly in manufacturing under COVID. And we have some new regional pathway programs that have started, and you see those mentioned there. On the credit side, we did not start any new programs this year, which you'll see reflected in your packet. Objective 4, improving interaction between the college and the community. So in a lot of ways, the presentation that Lewis and Bree just provides you much, much more information than our high-level metrics here. So that was well timed. I will still go over this briefly. The first piece of this is actually applied learning. And as you all know, applied learning was an area where we took it was a rough go under COVID. initially because there was just not a lot of interaction around being able to do student placements. But this has really come back together and done well. And while you'll see that number looks low, it actually is outpacing where we normally are with registration. So once the numbers are fully in, we'll likely exceed where we have been in the past. So that's excellent and coming together really well and has rebounded after COVID. Okay, so alumni engagement took a pretty big hit under COVID and is rebounding as Lewis detailed, different huge numbers of new participation. So we're going to expect that continues to go up, even though under this strategic plan we had this sort of lack of engagement for that time period that you see reflected there. But as I said, the extensive information that he just gave you is much more detailed than what this particular metric looks like. All right, looking at organizational sustainability. So our main emphasis during COVID on organizational sustainability, besides remaining sustainable, has been really focusing in on leadership. And in the past, we've talked to you about the leadership series and the Peaks project and all of these different aspects that we've worked on. But I wanted to highlight this new aspect that we added this year overall with Leadership Ontario. And this has become a great new partnership that we added with the county this year. So we've added this to the suite of leadership opportunities. So overall, when we look at this aspect of the strategic plan, we went from essentially 0 leadership programs to a well-developed leadership program with a lot of different aspects. And this is sort of the newest one that we've added in this year. I think it's particularly exciting that it's in partnership with the county. So it's another aspect to leadership. As we close out the strategic plan, this will be an interesting one to look at overall how many employees have participated in all of the different aspects, and also to think about how it will go forward. All right, and objective 6, looking at environmental sustainability. This is very much thanks to the good work of my good friend Kathy Ahern over in facilities. How convenient for you to have attended tonight so I can do that call out. And all that great leadership that we've seen in there. We're continuing to really do well in this area and to bring a lot of leadership and thought around what that will do. And I think this is a good example of when you put something in a strategic plan, sometimes it's work that would have happened anyway. And I think it's possible that that's true. This work would have happened anyway. Kathy was thinking about this work. Dr. Nye was thinking about this work. The board was talking about this work. What happens when you put it in a strategic plan is it gets talked about here. It'll get talked about in College Council when I go and give this presentation here. So it brings a degree of transparency and conversation to work that would have maybe been done, but wouldn't have been talked about. And that's an important feature to strategy as well. And again, this continues to look at the different aspects that we have looked at. So, questions? I was under time.
Questions? Looking at me?
I'm not looking at you. I'm looking in general.
Well, and with the average age of the students, we know that the school age populations are continually dropping.
For
so
now.
Is it, but with what we've been tracking, so is the number of 24 and over actually increasing, or is it because the others decrease?
No, it is actually increasing. So it's not just a proportion, it is the actual number is increasing. It is definitely a lot in online. We see that number increasing in online. And I do think that speaks to that need for flexibility in the adult student population. It'll be interesting to see how we continue to track that as we come fully out of COVID. It is a number that was also, COVID was right smack in the middle of it. But it's quite consistent, the data are quite consistent. Yeah.
Just along those lines, has there been any internal discussions about setting targets for online students? irrespective of whether they're local or not?
Targets for enrollment?
Yeah.
We do set targets for enrollments.
Yeah, I mean, we set targets for every like within our strategic enrollment,
By subpopulation.
by subpopulation.
We do projections,
Yeah,
right?
I believe,
And then targets, which are aspirational.
yeah, so that's all part of our strategic enrollment planning process, but also, how we do projections. In terms of local versus not local,
Well,
That's the part.
I want to just clarify the question more
Yeah.
than anything else, was to talk about growing online enrollment, but not at the expense of on-site enrollment.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We do disaggregate where our students come from, like we look at their geolocation. And I don't know that we break that out in terms of targeting, but we do look at where they're coming from. Our largest growth in online has been from outside the county, and in particular from the New York City area. And, you know, there's also been some other, like, you know, we had the students from Oregon and et cetera, right? But the majority of growth has been in the downstate area. So,
I'm interested in the placement policies
Mhm.
in developmental ed. And you've noted in your slides, there's a new placement policy. Is that policy leading us towards the elimination of developmental ed?
I would not say it's going towards the elimination, so it's a co-rec model. So it is twofold. She's referencing a slide I didn't cover, but is in your packet. So a couple of years ago, we did a twofold change in DevEd. One was to create a co-rec model. That means that when students come in and need developmental ed, that they can it's a co-rec with the regular English. So they take developmental English and they take English 101 at the same time. And that is a national model. It has a lot of research behind it. That's really just started though here. So we don't have a lot of data on it. The early data is showing that it is effective, but it's very, very early data. We really only have about a semester's worth of data on the co-rec. The other piece to the change was how we were placing students, and that's what you more see reflected in that slide. So we went in both math and English to a multi-method placement. So previously they took AccuPlacer, which is a placement test, and based on their score they were placed. The problem with that, as with most types of like test taking, is it's too singular, it's not nuanced enough, and so students weren't being placed accurately. They now use this multi-method, and you know, there's one way of doing it in English and one way of doing it in math, but in both cases they look at transcripts, they look at high school grades, there's an essay if they need to, et cetera, et cetera. So they've gotten much, much more accurate. The consequence is far fewer students are in DevEd because we're getting better at figuring out who really needs to be in DevEd. But those students who are in DevEd really need to be in DevEd, right? So they're needier. They really much more need to be in that DevEd. And they don't necessarily have the misplaced students to raise up the pass rate of the class. But it is much better for those students who needed to be in English 101 and should have been in English 101 to begin. So those are twofold things that are happening, and we'll continue to follow the data with the co-rec model. Nationally, the co-rec model is very effective, and all of this is about momentum. It's about helping students get what they need when they need it, but getting them on a path for success quickly in that first term, and not slowing them down so much that they're not making progress. That momentum will help them towards quicker success. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay.
Come a long way. Thank you.
More to go. Yes, you're welcome, and I'll see you again in a couple months. I believe Dr. Nye will be talking to you today about our next strategic plan. And I'll leave you with one final thought. One of the things we've noted about this strategic plan is we have a lot of metrics. and it's very broad. And so he's going to introduce some ideas for you today about making sure we're really focused, or as focused as we need to be in our next strategic plan, because that focus will help us focus more on those different areas. And I think that reflects well with the breadth of metrics that we have here. So I'll leave that to you, Dr.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Donna, thank you for and second.
Second, Santa?
And Santa, thank you for second. Meeting is adjourned. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, George. And we'll now start the finance and facilities. Steve, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear and see everyone just fine. Thanks very much, Joan.
Hear you too. All right, go right ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the August 3rd Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. And first order of business is the June 1st, 2022 committee minutes. First, if I can entertain a motion and a second for review of those.
Barb Hamlin, I so move.
Rich Russell, second.
Okay. Any comments or questions or changes to those minutes? And I guess as a point of order, we're not approving those right now, are we, Trustee Geist? That's something we do in the full meeting. This is just a review. Any comments or questions with regard to the review? Hearing none, move right on to the presentation of our audit. And as I'm introducing Randy Shepard, I'll give Trustee Astles a heads up to maybe speak about a committee meeting we had last week with the Enterprise Risk and Audit Committee. But please welcome Mr. Randy Shepard, a partner with Bonadeo Group. And Randy, I believe you're joining us remotely via WebEx.
He said he's called it. He's already on, he said on the phone.
It looks like he's a participant.
Yeah, mute.
Here's him, but
He is on mute. Randy, you are on mute.
I'll
And Penny, please remind us how to get off mute.
I'm sending him a message right now.
So as he is doing that, Trustee Astles, maybe you could just, for the full board and those present, just give a quick update with regard to our meeting that we had last night that you chaired so marvelously for the audit and enterprise risk.
Well, yeah, we met as the audit committee, and Randy will talk about it here shortly, but he came in with a completed audit, and we went through it in a fair amount of detail. We spent an hour and a half or so at it, addressing both committee questions, but also doing a fairly detailed overview of the audit process, and the conclusions for both. And I'm sure he'll address those here this evening. But you know, I think we can all agree it was a lengthy audit process that we went through this year. And I want to give credit to the staff that still exists in the finance department. Some credit for a lot of extra work that they did to provide the information that the Bonadeo Group needed for the audit.
And Trustee Astles, in addition to the trustees who were present, we had some guests as well, and maybe you could talk a little bit about those that were present.
You go ahead and do that, Steve. I'm having a senior moment.
Sure, that's fine. Now, we had from Ontario County, Chris DeBolt, our county administrator, and also Mary Gates were both present. And then from staff, Christine and Mike were also present as well. And of course, Dr. Nye. So we had, I believe, trustees plus that group right there. And then of course, Randy Shepard from Bonadeo. It looks like, Randy, you are off mute right now. Trustee Astles, anything else you might want to add from last week's committee meeting?
Let's give Randy the opportunity to talk about the audit.
Randy, why don't you take it away?
Okay, great. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I apologize for not having a video, but my signal where I am seems to be very spotty, so I wanted to eliminate any kind of bandwidth issues. I trust that everyone did get a copy of the Board of Trustees presentation, the summary sheet that was forwarded ahead of time. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So again, thank you very much. And Mr. Astles did mention that we did meet, in detail with the audit committee last week and went through really the entire document in great detail. So the purpose of today really is to just kind of give an overview in case there's any questions that the full trustees have. I'd be happy to address them. And again, I know many of you don't know me. My name is Randy Shepard, and I am the auditor account. I also am our firm's practice leader for our government space, where this audit falls under. So as we look to kind of reorganize and move things around, that was one of the reasons why I took over this account this year. So if we look at the executive summary, which begins on page 1, what this is really kind of a high-level snapshot of really some of the more important components of what we want to let you know about. The first of which is the independent auditor's report, if you see that. So we did issue an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion, and we did finalize those documents today. The report date is July 29th, but we did finalize those and issue those in final form electronically. If there are any hard copies that are needed, we'll work with management to get those to you, but we wanted to at least get the electronic version out as soon as possible. The second item under there talks about internal control, and we did identify during our audit process one material weakness and one significant deficiency in internal control. And so what those are, the material weakness relates to really the reconciliation process, and those are outlined in that financial statement document, excuse me, as part of the uniform guidance or yellow book report, I should say. And the second item is a significant deficiency related to capital assets and the accounting for those, because there is some complexities between, the county acquired assets, what they purchase on your behalf, which have to get reported on college's books, as well as the items that you guys purchase independently that are owned by you. Historically, those haven't been picked up on the internal records of the college, and they really should. So that's really the crux of what that point is talking about, as well as making sure that there's communication with the county as it relates to what has been purchased through the year, for the year, and should be picked up. The third item talks about audit adjustments. We did propose, and management did record a significant number of material adjustments throughout the audit process. And that is part of the reason why this audit process took a little longer. There were some things that needed to be reconciled, but with that, it did allow me and allowed me to be comfortable issuing what I said at the beginning as a clean or unmodified audit report. And that is the highest level of assurance that an auditor can give. So that's what's important. Really, that's what you're looking for. In terms of accounting policies and estimates, essentially what that means is just that the college does determine and assess and what accounting policies are appropriate and what should be used and what estimates are recorded, and we look at those and assess those through our process. And then lastly on this page, in terms of the single audit side, and we did finish that audit as well. That'll be finalized by the end of tomorrow. And there were about 22.6 million in federal funds that are part of that single audit, 16.5 million of that was your student financial aid component. And then there's another 5.5 million for the HERF funding as well. And we did have one significant deficiency as it relates to the student financial aid cluster through that, through our audit testing, which we reviewed in detail last week, which really had to do with some documentation related to withdrawals and refunds related to the program. So we can talk a little bit, if you turn to page 2, which is a little more detail about what's titled Auditor's Communication to those charged with governance. And you can read through this at your leisure. I'll just point out a couple items because obviously we don't need to read each item for you. As I stated, under qualitative aspects, the accounting policies, it is management's responsibility to set those policies. There was nothing new this year, so there was no new accounting standards implemented during the current year. But what we do point out in the management letter as well is that there is a new accounting standard that is effective for the fiscal year you're in, and that will be ending at the end of this month, and that's related to leases. And that's a significant accounting standard which will require significant effort to kind of identify, record, and capture that information. And we did talk about that briefly, actually more than briefly, at the meeting last week as well. And I know there was some discussion about getting some assistance, or at least talking to the county about how they went about that process as well. Down towards the bottom of the page, it identifies, you can see 3 bullet points. Those identify the adjustments and the estimates that are part of the college's financial statement. Of the New York State pension retirement system. And I just noticed now the third item is a repeat item. One of those should say depreciation. So I apologize for that as I looked at this. So there's the 3 estimates are depreciation expense on your assets, your allowance for uncollectible accounts, and the estimate for the net pension liability. If we turn to page 3, which continues with our communications with governance, at the top of the page, because we do work for the Board of Trustees, we're hired by the Board of Trustees as opposed to management. We do communicate if there's any issues encountered in performing the audit. And what I do identify there is it obviously took longer than anticipated. And as we communicated and I mentioned, there were some items related to reconciliations which resulted in the audit being delayed. But we did work, throughout the year with management to get to the right answer, to get things where we needed to be. As Trustee Astles mentioned, there was a collaborative effort, a lot of time on both sides to get that completed. And then in the center of the page talks about the adjustments that we recorded. And these are in summary form. You will have a larger document, which is our recorded communications letter, that will outline these in more detail. But the more significant entries we recorded were, the first one was a $680,000 entry. If you recall, back in your 2020 year, there was some voluntary separation agreements. Those were booked as an expense during 2020 from an audit perspective. But from the college's perspective, they were still showing as an expense in 2021, and we had to reverse that. So the impact of that adjustment was an increase to your bottom line. The next item, about 1.6 million of adjustments related to capital assets. As I mentioned, that was one of the significant deficiencies we identified, things that should be captured and picked up by the college throughout the year. The next item relates to, about $500,000 to true up some other liabilities. So part of the liabilities that just for activity that hadn't been reconciled, we true that up to really what was owed or what was a liability of the college at year end. So the impact of that essentially was to lower the liability or increase your bottom line. And then a reclassification entry, really just to properly report where the scholarship allowance and student aid payments need to show up on your statements. We did not have any disagreements with management. So again, all those adjustments that we identified, we worked through them and everyone was on board with what needed to happen. And the rest of it, again, you can read through at your leisure. If we want to turn ahead to page 5 now, what page 5 represents is the condensed statement of net position, which is the balance sheet, if you will, for the college. And comparing 21 to 20, current assets were up about 4 million, primarily related to cash. There's some additional financial aid that came in through the year, which you'll notice when we look at some of the revenue activity, but that was the primary driver for cash being up. You'll see a new item there under non-current assets called net pension asset. So that essentially is actuarially based. So that's just the piece of the overfunding at the state level of the New York State pension system, and that's what you have to pick up. And then looking at down below, current liabilities, really consistent year over year, just down about 1.5. And then on the non-current liabilities, you'll see a big decrease of about 9.6 million. That is because that non-pension component, that was a liability last year, so at 2020. So when the state calculated their pension obligations, they were actually in an underfunded or a non-funded situation. That gets allocated through. This year it flipped the other way, so that's why that is essentially down to zero. And then the other big item there, deferred inflows, 16.1 million compared to 1 million last year. That also is related to the pension system. So when they have significant swings, and the biggest piece of that really is their actual results to projected results on an actuarial basis, that's a non-cash item, and they amortize that actuarially over a period of time. So that's why that sits in this category called deferred inflows. And lastly, at the bottom, you'll see your overall net position was up about 4 million for the year. So that, loosely defined means that you had more revenues than expenditures for the current year, and as a result, your net position did go up. Any questions on that statement?
So Randy, yes, I guess I do. Steve Martin here.
Okay. Yep.
I don't think you've showed it specifically at the Exhibit A, the schedule of adjustments. You've spoken about those adjustments. Is that something you're going to separately identify in your presentation here?
I don't have. I sent out the other documents this afternoon. I'm not sure if those got forwarded as well.
They did.
I don't know if someone. Oh, okay.
They did.
So there is a letter. So one of those documents, it's a letter that's addressed to the Board of Trustees. The back of that, Exhibit A, I don't have them laid out all individually in this document.
Okay.
I summarized them more specifically. But if there's anyone you want me to talk through, Steve, I'd be more than happy to do it.
No, I'll hold
I do
my
have a
question
copy
for the
with
end.
me.
I'll hold my question for the end. That's fine.
Okay.
Keep on going. Other questions from other
Okay.
trustees? Okay, keep going, Randy.
Okay. And I apologize if I keep cutting in and out. Hopefully you can hear me. Page 6 is the unrestricted fund balance. So essentially, this is reconciling what gets reported on the SUNY annual report to the audited financial statements. And so what was reported unrestricted at the end of last year was 5.9. So this year you see you had 49.9 million of operating revenues compared to 44.3, increase about 12%, and then operating expenses were up slightly as well. So on an overall basis, you can see the increase of 3.7 million. And then when you look at reconciling that to what the financial statements say, there was the impact of some audit adjustments, which lowered what was in that SUNY report, which brings it down to 8.2 million, which is what was on the audited financial statements as well for unrestricted net position. So this schedule here doesn't include any of your capital activity, and that's one of the primary differences there. And then the last page we have really is just some graphical depictions on page 7 showing where your unrestricted fund balance has changed from 2017 till now. So really relatively flat, we'll look at it from 17 to 20. And then the larger jump this year, again, because a lot of the federal aid that came through. And this is all unaudited information. This is what's provided to SUNY from management. And then the bottom table, the bottom graph shows you just the difference between revenues and expenses for the year, and the big gap for 2021, which led to the increase in your unrestricted fund balance up above. So again, that was more of a high level. Again, we did go through in great detail with the audit committee, but if there's some specific questions, and Steve, it sounds like you do have something, I'm happy to address those now.
First of all, questions from my fellow trustees. Anyone? So as you're thinking of questions, I do have one. So the percentage of our fund balance against budget, I haven't done the math here yet, but is that something that you show either graphically or something that's been computed or identified in any of your reporting here back to us?
Steve,
I'm sorry, Randy, did you hear us?
He's gone from the screen, Steve. I think we lost him again, didn't we, Cheryl? Yeah.
Steve, this is Rob. If they do have the numbers of the percentage down below on the bar graph chart that's up right now.
Yeah, I can't quite see that. Okay. So it's what, 8.2 million?
Well, it depends on, Adam, you want to speak up? You've got.
Oh, I see. The 20, is it 20%? No way, it can't be that high.
So have me?
So it is around 15 to 16% right now.
Okay.
But that is primarily due to the federal funding that we have received.
Right.
Yeah, apologize. I must have cut out for a moment.
I think we got the answer to that question. Thanks, Randy. Other questions of trustees for Randy Shepherd? Randy, keep on going with your presentation.
Oh, actually, I mean, that really was all the prepared remarks that I had based on what was presented in the past. So unless you want to go through specific matter, that was there, Steve?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. Well, why don't you do that and hit some highlights of that?
Yep, for sure. So the document that we're talking about is the communication of matters related to internal control. You know, when you look at that, these items are some suggestions to consider. And then we will talk about what the material weakness and other item was as well. But these items are really some of the lower level recommendations or observations. The first one relates to staffing. This is obviously something that the college and the trustees are fully aware of. You know, there's been some challenges over the past few years, you know, both brought out by COVID as well as just transitions. And really our recommendation here is to make sure and think about whether you have the appropriate staffing complement, you know, across the various areas, looking at whether you have the appropriate people in the right positions. We talked about that at the meeting as well. And just making sure that you've got the appropriate segregation of duties that need to be there for certain areas, specifically student financial aid, because there are some minimum expectations as it relates to that. The second item relates to your CARES Act and HERF reporting. One of the stipulations of that is it should be readily available on the college's website. You know, what we did is try to search for that information, and we were not able to easily identify it or find it. So we want to make sure that you have that information out there as you should, and that's easily rectified. The other two items on the back of that page really are what we call other matters. The first one is technology related. There are some servers that are still operating on an old Microsoft 2008 operating system. Those are at risk a little bit because Microsoft does not support those. So we recommend that you reduce that risk by updating those servers. And the last one is that GASB 87 related to leases that I talked about. So significant change to financial reporting is effective for the year that you're in right now. We did report this, you know, at this meeting last year as well, that it was coming. So that will take some time to get implemented for the college. And then if we want to talk about the more significant items, if we look at the larger packet, the actual financial statements, and it's really the last 2 pages of that document.
Do you know the name of the document? I'm trying to find it.
Oh. Yes, I'm sorry. It'll say financial statements as of August 31, 2021 and 2020.
But do you know the name of the file itself?
Oh, that
It's underneath the financial statements of August 31, 2021 and 2020. And it is pages 53 and 54. The findings underneath financial statement audit that Randy's referring to. I've got it in front of me here.
okay. Is everyone
I think
finding their way there?
The very end of the document there, 53 and 54. Let's just give our colleagues a chance to pull that up.
Yep. Let me know when we're ready.
Okay, just give us a moment.
Yep. We only had page 50. there's several documents that were sent to us, we weren't all together,
Randy, do you know what the file name was?
so. Yeah, the file name is what we're,
You sent 5 files and it's got different names for it.
So it's the Finger Lakes Community College 2021 GASFS finals.
Thank you, Adam.
yeah, that one.
Scrolling right now, Randy.
Okay.
What page was it?
53, page 53, schedule of findings and question costs for the year end August 31st, 2021 in the upper left. I think that's it right there. Yes. Okay, Randy, we do have it in front of us.
Okay, great. Right, so if we look at that, the first item is what's considered the material weakness, and that one relates to the account reconciliations and close process. So as I mentioned, there was a number of areas that when we began the audit process, looking at it, even just analytically, looking compared this year compared to last year, the trending, the results just didn't make sense. And so as we continued to question, a number of those resulted in journal entries that we had to be posted to correct various areas of accounts receivable, some revenue areas, et cetera. And so really, we understand that a lot of that has to do with the transition and turnover, and maybe people not having appropriate resources and time to review some of that stuff. So again, that's part of our recommendation, is to just make sure that you allocate that time appropriately, maybe perform more reconciliations throughout the year, or even what I call mini close periods during the year. So either monthly or quarterly, almost do like a hard close to really analyze and assess where those accounts are lying, and making the necessary adjustments throughout the year, so it doesn't become, a large adjustment or a large thing at year end. And on the last page, page 54, the second item is a significant deficiency, again related to capital assets. And as I did mention previously, there's not a real reconciliation process that happens between what the county is recording and providing to the college, and because it's not getting recorded on the college's books at year end, it really has always become an audit step. So the college wasn't really aware of what the numbers should be, where they go. We want to make sure that those are picked up and reported appropriately, and that the college is taking responsibility for that component.
And I think I can certainly safely say, in fact, it's stated right in this document at the end of both of these recommendations, that the college agrees with the recommendation and will review the practices that have been suggested. On the capital asset side, again, Jeff and others that were there last week at the committee meeting, the county, this is going to be a collaboration with the county to properly identify the assets and understand how they're ultimately booked. And that won't necessarily happen quickly, but there's a mutual commitment from both the college and the county to make this happen and to rectify it. Did I accurately state that, Jeff, in terms of what you recall?
Yes.
Great. Any questions of those 2 final pages that Randy has just kind of summarized as we conclude here the audit process? Randy, anything else that you might add as we close?
No, I don't have anything at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Nye or Adam, anything else final from you at this point?
Nothing for me, Adam.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Randy, we appreciate your time. We'll let you get back to whatever else you were doing. Thanks for joining us during this segment of our meeting.
Yep, you're welcome again. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I appreciate being able to speak with you.
Great. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks again. Have a pleasant afternoon. Okay. We'll move on to the 21-22 operating budget and finance report update. Adam, if you would, please.
All right, in your packet is the finance report. A little bit taller. There's two reports in there. The first one is the May report. I'm not really going to go into that one. It's just in there for informational purposes. What I am going to kind of review real quick is the June report. So as of June 30th, we are about 83% complete in the fiscal year. If we start with the budget portion, so those total college revenues that are listed at $52 million, you will notice that those are higher than the approved budget, $47.4 million, and that is due to the federal aid that has been received year to date. There will be two adjustments coming up at the next board meeting. One will be for additional funds received because of her funding, and the second one will be a budget adjustment due to grant funding. So that is why that budget number there is higher than what you had approved last year for the approved budget. On the revenue side, year-to-date revenue is $49 million, about 94% of funds received to budget. Non-credit is still tracking slightly behind at about 29%, which is a little behind the trend now. Last year we were at 40%. I looked up as of today, it is currently at 34%, so it is increasing. And we are hopeful by fiscal year end it will be on target for the budget. For the federal aid line, that's that $7.3 million. It's two components. It's the institutional funds and as well as student aid funds. Institutional accounts for about $2.1 million, and the student aid accounts for about $5.18 million. In both those categories, for the institutional side, we've expensed or drawn down about $1.6 million, and for student aid, we've drawn down about $1.87 million, almost the total of the allotted portion of that. And those are funds that were sent to students to kind of catch up on if they had a balance on their bill. On the expense side, year-to-date expenses are tracking well. 42.7 million year-to-date, we're about 78%, which is on target. The only line that really stands out again is that non-credit line, but again, that should catch up in this last month and a half within the fiscal year reporting standards. Supplies and expenses, it includes the HERF funding as well, so both institutional and student, hence the larger than approved expense budget. And with 2 months left on paper, again, because this is as of June 30th, so July and August, with 2 months left, pretty confident that we're going to end under budget within the fiscal year. Historically, FLCC's expenses are stable month to month. So if we trend out the last 2 months, expenses are projected to be around 51.2 million, or about 98% of the projected budget, which right now is at the $52 million mark. So I think that historically, FLCC has been about 97 to 97.5% of expenses to budget, about 98% on this projection, so that does fall within those trends. With the HERF funding, we have realized lost revenue both for 19 and 20 and 20 and 21. That lost revenue totals about 2.2 million. It accounts for lost revenue with the drop in FTEs over the last couple of years. So we took a baseline from 18-19, what enrollment was, what the drop was from 19-20 and 20-21, calculated that, and then realized lost revenue, or we were able to capture HERF funding and realize that as lost revenue and put back into our fund balance. We also realized lost revenue in the form of salaries. At the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, we had staff that were still paid even though they were at home because they could not do their job remotely. So we were able to realize that as lost revenue as well with the HERF funding. That's going to account for about $370,000. Both of those have a positive impact of the fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. So that's why you will see at the end of this fiscal year, Randy just went over that currently it's 9.7 million. That was the beginning of the fiscal year. That number will go up again at the end of this coming fiscal year when we actually realize all this in the fund balance. I did hint at that when we did the budget presentation for next fiscal year, that the fund balance is projected to be $12 to $13 million. So again, that's increasing because of these lost revenues we're capturing. The other report in here is just without stimulus funding. Again, this is just for reference only, just to kind of show what it would be like if we did not receive any federal aid in that manner. The only thing that changes is that federal aid line. We've drawn that down to zero just to kind of reflect that. If you recall, we did budget $1.9 million in federal aid for that fiscal year. We did back that out because I don't think that was appropriate to do as far as budgeting against expenses. And if you look at the supply and expense line down below, it now represents the $10 million, which is more in line with what was approved in the budget last year. Not the 17 million that's on the other page, but again, that represents all the HERF funding. So if you do look at that, if you look at it again, the trend out, $51.2 million budget. If we were to realize that against what the current budget is, or approved budget, look at a possible deficit of $3.8 million if we did not get the HERF funding. So that really did help stabilize us as far as capturing expenses related to the pandemic, as well as the lost revenue helps stabilize in the fund balance as well. So it was not necessarily saving grace from the federal government in all these fundings, but it did help us stabilize and focus more on the FTEs and ensuring that enrollment numbers are stabilized, which Dr. Abeas and her team has done a tremendous job at as well. Any questions?
Just want to add, so have we received all of the funds that are COVID related that we're going to receive, or are there still some out there that we can capture?
There's still a little bit out there, not much, but what is left, so we can only draw it down after we actually realize the expense.
Yeah.
So from the student side, I think there is a balance of maybe $7,000. Compared, percentage of the $5.18 million, that's really good. That's pretty much done. On the institutional side, there is roughly, I want to say somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000. We do still have some initiatives that are ongoing, and we're still waiting for expenses to come in. We kept a little bit of reserve for this upcoming year as far as pandemic-related expenses, because we have been extended our ability to expense these funds through next year. So we have a little bit of reserve in there. We have not drawn down the salaries that I just mentioned before, so that number is still in there. So there is still a little bit in there, but not much.
And is there any time frame or deadline out there by which we have to get this done?
Yes, it's next, I believe it's June of next year, 2023.
June of next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I could just follow Trustee Assel's question, Adam. So what's the anticipated dollars that will be realized from the federal funds we've received in next fiscal year, which of course starts September 1, and as we roll into 2023? So from an estimate standpoint and an actual accounting standpoint, roughly what kind of dollars are we looking at that will in fact impact the 22-23 budget?
I don't anticipate that to be a very big impact, because we're going to try and true up all the numbers for this fiscal year so that we are, for the most part, done with the larger expense lines for the HERF funding. Like I said, we're going to have a little bit of reserve in there for 22-23 expenses. Don't anticipate that to be a lot. But I think the overall impact may be anywhere between $200,000 and $300,000 for next fiscal year with the HERF funding.
Okay. Okay. Other questions of Adam with regard to the operating budget we have in front of us, 21-22? Questions from trustees? Adam, anything else?
No, that's it for that one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move to facilities update. Now, Ms. Catherine Ahern, if you would, please.
Good evening. I was asked to just review the capital improvement project process. So at a very high level, I'm going to walk through and give you some examples of the submissions that we have to do for Ontario County and for SUNY. So we'll go through that, and then I'll give you examples, and then some of the larger projects, the additional projects, i.e. nursing, just so you can understand the funding and how the request goes through. Next slide, please. So the whole process begins in March every calendar year. And in March, we submit a 6-year capital project plan to Ontario County. Similar, Ontario County asks all the different highway department, et cetera, to do that. And we look at a basic spreadsheet of those 6 years, but each one of those capital improvement projects has a template that is submitted to the Ontario County. They have a database, they have a very particular way to do it, and it talks about the project, how come you have to do it, the justification, et cetera. And I'm going to step back for 1 second. All of this always refers to the master plan. So as you all know, we talk about the master plan, and we're starting that. Monday we had probably between 15 and 20 different consulting firms here. So they will be submitting proposals for that. But this becomes really our guideline for funding not only through Ontario County, but through SUNY. So in March, I submit that, I start the process, I submit a draft to the county, and then April through June, each one of those is talked about, and I spent a lot of time with Tom Harvey looking at what we're asking for and what year we're asking for. And remember, I talk about we go to a 5-year, we look at it in 5 years. We're really only funding the next year, and what happens in those 5 years, I may ask for something, example, in 2025. But because things change and everything is somewhat fluid, next year, all of a sudden, it may have to go to 2024. So a lot of that conversation is spent before we do a submission. And so in July, myself and Tom Harvey, we submit that 6-year plan to Public Works, to Ways and Means Committee for their review. And then while they're doing that, in August, the SUNY process starts. Very similar, it's a 5-year plan. Of course, it's a different form, even though I have to put the same information in, so I do it again, which is fine. And that gets submitted at the end of August as a draft to SUNY. Then what becomes important with SUNY, as you know, when they fund it, they will match. But the match has to have a sponsor. A lot of this is Ontario County, but it's also the foundation, the association, its donations. And those physically have to be an approved resolution before SUNY will give you the additional monies. So in November, Ontario County, they will approve the plan, and then they will provide the resolution associated with that next capital project year. In November and December, after I've submitted it in August to SUNY, we continue to work through it, we modify it. I work with our liaison, Rebecca Goldstein, at SUNY. She will ask questions if we're missing things, help me, and there's additional forms associated with that too, i.e. if we have computers, we need to itemize the computer so they understand where the money is going. So those are some examples of that. Then during the time, once I submit it, November and December, we're modifying it because in November, Ontario County will provide the approved resolutions. Then I can submit and modify my submission to SUNY because now we have the approval and SUNY says, oh, you do have the local money, so that we will be able to match that. And then fingers crossed, we wait for the April 1st for New York State to approve that process and to approve our projects. I know that's a lot, and I really try to keep it at a high level because there's a lot of iterative activity that happens. Any questions associated with that? So the next slide, please. So this is just an example, and thank you, Dr. Nye, you and I worked through this of trying to just kind of keep it simple for that. But this is the 2023 capital improvement project, and these are the total monies, but this is how it was broken down. So one of them, example, the electric panel replacements. That has been on the capital project list for probably 10 years. Over the years, 2 or 3 years ago, we did a plan for that, and then every year we're going to ask a little more money to be able to provide that, because the total project is a few $1 million, and instead of doing it all at one time, we're doing little bits and pieces, utilizing the capital project. But that has been on the list for a long time, again, adjusted, being moved. CMAC pond survey, et cetera, the lab renovation that's on there. This is the lab renovation that we've talked about before pertaining to nursing. We're going to do 2 projects next summer taking advantage of construction dollars and having people here getting things done. We feel confident that we can get a lab renovation on the 3rd floor done, which is tied into nursing, along with the 4th floor, and I'll talk about that in the additional projects. So it's all very strategic, and a lot of conversation happens. It's nothing, we're not doing that, we're not just pulling it out of the air.
So Kathy, can you just remind us again a little bit about the CMAC pond survey, at least maybe for my benefit and others?
Yeah, so this has been on the list several times. There are 2 ponds in GLOC proper, and they have to be maintained. And we never have gone through to really understand what the maintenance of those have to be. So we're going to get those surveyed and then really have a plan to be able to understand what that maintenance cost will be. When they were built, we haven't ever done that. So it's really somewhat of an exploratory for us to better understand, and then for us to better finance in the operating dollars and how to take care of that.
Are there any environmental challenges to that that you know of, or maybe there's something that's discovered?
No, that's a very good question. I can't tell you where the wetlands, et cetera, are in that area, but yes, there will be some.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Keep going.
On the next slide, please. So we talked about the capital projects, which are usually between $1 million and $2 million, and we have lots of little projects underneath those. But the additional projects, i.e. the greenhouse that we continue to have talked about, right now that's slotted for 2025. That has been slotted many, many different years, but it's all about getting that local sponsor. So I still submit that so that it's not a surprise to Ontario County or SUNY. Whether or not that gets funded in 2025, I can't speak to that, but we have to get it in there so we don't want to surprise them. But the thinking is, talking with Ontario County, they are talking about providing $1 million for that. We're saying donations of $2 million. We're saying SUNY will match $6 million. I don't know that exact number. When we originally looked at the greenhouse in kind, I think we were under $2 million. But now as we look at the horticulture program expanding and really looking at what they want to do, it's not just going to be replacing the greenhouse in kind. There'll be maybe some labs or maybe some other things. And I say maybe because none of that has been detailed, but we need to get it slotted so that it's not going to be a surprise. The nursing is phase 2. We've talked about this. This is the $1.5 million $1 million grant that we have. We have already started that project, and we have already been working with Chase Construction, and we know that it's going to be more than $1.5 million. So through Ontario County, they're supporting adding some additional dollars to get that completed, and that is that $415, and then SUNY will match. So we'll get additional monies to be able to build the lab that we wanted. And then lastly, Hemlock Hall. This is the honors house that we've talked about. We're not sure where that's going to land, but we do recognize that the program proper will probably take some space in main campus, and there will be a renovation. Again, very pie in the sky, not really knowing exactly, but we need to get it on the list so that there's no surprises. And where that falls year-wise, I can't speak to that. But that's the process of what we have to go through. Any questions?
Terrific. Questions of Kathy? Very complete and very detailed and very current. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We have an abundance of resolutions. We can all see them straight in front of us. The very first one, of course, follows the audit presentation by Randy Shepard from the Bonadillo Group. Adam, would you take that one for us?
Yeah, so the first resolution is to accept the auditor's report for FLCC operating funds and federal funds for FLCC fiscal year 2020-2021. And obviously this is the annual audit that was just presented by Mr. Randy Shepard.
Quick question.
Question? Go ahead, please, Jeff.
And I probably should have asked this of Randy, but when this was all said and done, just for everybody's benefit, did we have to take any money out of the fund balance to balance
The budget? No.
usage? We didn't have to do that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. After all the adjustments and so forth, that really was not the case. So, good question, Jeff. Any other questions of Adam? All right, thank you. We have 2 in a row here by Mr. Ed Kelty, and has to do with Forelli. As you're making your way to the front of the room, please, if you would, enlighten us on these 2 resolutions, if you would, please.
Steve, could we wait just a minute so that Rob could do an introduction?
Absolutely, fine idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Geis. Actually, I was going to ask her to do it. She punted it back to me. Very wise. But
Privilege of the chair.
if it's okay, I'll continue. Do you want to still punt it? I'm good. I just wanted to, on behalf of all the trustees, welcome Mr. Ed Kelty. He comes to us from locally. He moved here 2 years ago and lives near Honeoye Falls area. Had a friend that lived in the area, and they were living in Phoenix with young children, and said we need to go to a better place, and chose to move to Honeoye Falls. Before those 2 years working in private industry, he worked for 32 years at Maricopa County Community College System, starting with Rio Salado Community College, which was the startup online program for Maricopa County Community College. That is the Community College of Phoenix, and that college has grown monstrously over the years. And Ed went from being an entry-level worker doing IT activities at Maricopa Community College of Rio Salado to the CIO of Maricopa County Community College System. We're really glad to have you here, Ed, and welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Members of the board, thank you.
You had a lot more information than I did, so I thank you. And I do welcome you here to the college. I hope you're going to be very happy here.
I am very happy here. This is my 13th day. So I also was told I need to respond to NJ, which is New John. So I don't know if that's, but I'll answer to almost anything. So the 2 items that are on the agenda tonight are for Forelli. One of them is to build an interface between our colleague HR system and Excelsius, our outsourced group for insurance. I don't know if you want any specific details, but it's to load data automatically between the 2 systems so we don't have an excess of manual data entry. Okay. The second one is ongoing support of a lot of our database systems and managing and monitoring them 24/7, which is a bit out of the ability of the IT department. We also use them for emergency support, patching and updating the systems, as well as working with them since 2016. So they're very familiar with our world, and that's an ongoing support for us. I don't know if there's any technical details you'd like to know.
Questions of Ed?
All right.
Thank you very much. Very complete. We appreciate that. We have a group then, Adam, back up. 7 resolutions are tied to your name. If you could take us through those, please.
Yep. So the next one on the list, approve lease extension with FLCC and FLCC Foundation's Honors House. Lease for 1-year extension from 9/1/22 to 8/31/23. It's the first of 3 1-year extensions, annual fee of $71,700. Questions on that one?
Okay.
Next one is, again, approved lease extension with FLCC and FLCC Foundation's Muller Field Station. It's, again, 1-year extension. It's the, again, first of 3 1-year extensions, annual fee of $40,000.
So I do have one question there, and maybe this is for Louis or Bree or someone. Were there dollars set aside by the Mueller family that also supports and continues to support south of Honeoye Lake there, the field station, the Mueller field station? Are those dollars still available to us?
Yes, they are. We get them yearly, but they are designated for various things, various programs.
That's all I had. Thanks. Keep going.
The next one, amendment to tuition schedule. There are 4 rates being amended as outlined in the resolution with an asterisk. The reason for the amendment is due to a formula calculation oversight, error on my part, with the assumption that formulas do not need to be manipulated manually after automatic calculation. So, lesson learned. Questions on that one? Next one is the approved write-off of accounts receivable. It's a write-off for 1920 tuition and fees totaling $334,477. We do have a budget set aside, an expense line for $475,000, so this is below the budgeted expenses that we anticipated.
Do we know how that dollar amount compares to last year or previous years?
Well, last year we were able to write off with HERF funds, so this is kind of a this is impacting our budget as we did not utilize funding last year from write-offs. I think historically, if I went back, write-offs were in the $400,000 range, so this is lower, but that also coincides with what we were able to do is covering student balances. And so I expect that trend, the dollar amount, to go up in the next couple of years as we get back to more of a normal normal environment for student account balances.
Okay, thank you.
Next one, authorize short-term contract for photography services with Ricky Van Camp. 12-month contract, not to exceed $13,600. It's the first of 2 renewals. Questions? Okay. Next one, authorization to sign a contract renewal for risk management and insurance brokerage services for FLCC. This contract is between FLCC and M&T Insurance Agency. It's a 5-year renewal term commencing on 10/1/22 through 9/30/27. I do anticipate a question on this and why 5 years, so I kind of have some talking points to highlight why I think this is a really good relationship that we have with M&T. So just for historical purposes, this is the end of a 5-year term we've had initially with M&T. So if you go back 5 years, we have a lower premium today than we did have with CIG back in 16-17. CIG was $368,000 in 16-17, and currently 21-22 are at $333,000. That's with adding cyber insurance of $26,000, which was new in 21-22. All maintaining a lower premium in 16-17, all despite a drastic increase in exposure due to natural occurrences, social inflation on liability, an increase in auto claims industry-wide. On average, payouts over the past 5 years tend to be 4 or 5 times higher than they were in 16-17. There are 3 components to our insurance: United Educators Liability Package, Property, and Cyber. United Educators, or UE, has the broadest coverage, highest limits on liability for the lowest price in the industry. They also provide credits to FLCC for risk mitigation measures. So last year we did a cyber security exercise. That documentation we submitted to UE, and they provided us a 6% credit on our insurance premium. This year we did a review on our contract management policy, and just reviewing those terms and updating that policy also provided us a 6% credit on our premium. We switched 2 years ago. We switched property coverage to travelers. That saved 16% on the premium, and we saved about 35% in premium costs by moving away from Marsh's consortium for the cyber piece. M&T is also the broker and manages these packages, the United Educators, Property, and Cyber. M&T will renew the property and auto with travelers for 1 more year. After that, they will go to market to ensure that they are equitable within the market. They do go to market every year with the cyber insurance to ensure they're getting the best rates in that area because it's so volatile. And they will maintain UE unless something drastically changes within the market, but they are hard to beat in the industry. Finally, FLCC has a very strong relationship with M&T. They work tremendously hard, have great response time, and pay attention to detail. Their success turns into our success, both from a liability standpoint as well as a financial standpoint. Any questions?
Mr. George, do we have an out for clause or for any reason?
I don't know if there's an out clause in the contract, but I will follow up and get back to you on that.
Other questions? Okay, keep going.
Let's see, the next one here is bid renewal for armed security guard services at FLCC Geneva, Victor, and Newark campuses. Primary vendor is Champion Security Services, total of $30,816. Secondary vendor is Wisdom Protection Services, total of $31,980. Both vendors have indicated desire to renew the bid at an 8.6% price increase, which is the maximum allowed in the bid documents. And I will state that the 8.6% is low considering if we had to go out to a new bid for additional services.
Final questions of Adam? Thank you very much. Next up is the renewal on the New York kitchen, and our current provost, Ms. Cassie Kent, if you would enlighten us about what we have in front of us. Please.
Hello again. This is for the lease renewal for New York Kitchen. It's our annual renewal. It's for 1 year. It supports the culinary program, and the amount is $11,000 per month flat rate. And also, we will be hiring a lab assistant at $1,000 per month flat rate. Any questions?
Is this an
Question?
Excuse me?
Is it an increase over last year?
That I don't.
So I can answer.
Yeah.
The monthly rate of $11,000 is consistent with last year. There was an increase in the lab assistant. I believe it went from either $600 or $800 a month to $1,000 a month.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Our final two items underneath resolutions. If we could hear from our HR professional, Michelle, with regard to the two resolutions that we have in front of us. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Trustee Martin. In your packet, you have a resolution to approve the 22-23 Management Confidential Salary Schedule, which includes a 2.5% annual increase for Management Confidential employees. These funds were allocated in the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Any questions about that resolution? Would you like me to move on to the next one?
Please.
The next one is for the acceptance of an agreement for retained search services. This is for an agreement with the Poly Group, and they'll be providing search services for our provost position vacated by Dr. Jonathan Kaiser in April. They previously performed a provost search for us when Dr. Kaiser was hired. We were very happy with their services and would like to engage them again. Any questions about that one?
I think it's a good investment in our future provost.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Adam, I guess there is one more, budget transfer report. If you might share, please.
Yeah, this is just the typical monthly budget transfer report. There are 15 transactions this month, a little higher than normal, but as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, Internally, we're just balancing accounts. It has no impact to the overall budget, either within the department or overall within the college.
Okay. Adam, before you get away, if you could just please stay up there for one moment. We'd like to acknowledge and thank Adam for his service and wish Adam well as he departs Finger Lakes Community College and heads a bit east to another community college, I believe Dutchess Community College. So on behalf of the trustees and the college, thanks for your service.
Appreciate it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Steve, do you have any other business?
No, I'd like to adjourn the meeting if that's okay with everyone else. A motion, please, to adjourn this committee meeting?
Rich will move that.
And a second. Okay. Madam Chair, back to you.
All right, thank you very much. It is 6:39, so can we take a 10-minute break?
Yes.
All right, 10 minutes.
And there are drinks over there on the side, waters and juices. I know that I get chilly. As soon as I go out, I'm sweating like.
I kind of like those.
I do too. AC makes me.
I'll send you an email, let you know.
Okay, sound good.
You may have to send it by a Pony Express to get it.
4 years ago, sorry, 5 years ago, I stood before you down at the Mueller Field Station and talked to you about how we needed to start the process for a new strategic plan. And when I did that, and what normally occurs is the president has a vision that they coordinate with the board of trustees to begin the process of where do we see the college going. And so we did that 5 years ago, and I'd like to show you how things got started. But before I do, one thing that I'd ask you to think about between what you heard from me or may have heard from me 2 months onto the job or 30 days after I've been in the job in August of 2016 and my first presentation to the public, I had a few thoughts. They're still consistent today. They drove my thought process 5 years ago. They still drive my thought process today. And I'd like to show those now. Next slide. Or is it up there? Cool, I get to do it, thanks. Hope I can do it right. Okay. At the 2016 opening day's presentation, oops, sorry. There we go. I better put that there, not touch it. There were two things.
Must be electronic.
It must be on a time.
I don't know either. Okay. While that's going on, I can say this by memory. There were two bullet points that still stand today. One was maximize opportunity to bring as many students as we can to FLCC to experience the goodness of FLCC. And that was a quote. I gave that 2016. Can we go again? Oh, there you go. Those two things, the bullets were maximize opportunities for student success, generate, maximize initiatives to fuel the culture and economic vitality. And then finally, I've said this for every year I've been here. Bring as many students here as we can to experience the goodness of FLCC, because there's so many people, to include all the people in this room. Every single employee here has a part to play, and you have a part to play to have our students experience that goodness and go on to great things. So when it got time to me to present to you 5 years ago, student success was in the middle and the forefront of what I was interested in achieving, as we all are. And then there were some other areas that were important. Next slide.
Can we try yours?
Okay.
Last time it worked.
All right.
Yeah.
Nope.
Oh, you just going the wrong way,
I'll try this. There. It's not working. I'm not working. I'm the other.
I think it needs a new battery.
But I can still go by memory here, and I gave you a slide once it comes up, that one, and if you've got your screen. Student success was in the middle, then you had, shoot, now I can't see well, but
Here you go.
reading glasses, community and industry connections, the vitality, institutional vitality, organizational sustainability, and opportunities innovation. And then when you see on the screen for the slide, if you're looking at your tablet or whatever, we had a discussion. And after that discussion, and with the cabinet, a few others, it branched out into a number of different boxes that included the things like academic vitality, financial vitality, enrollment vitality, and then you had environmental sustainability and organizational sustainability, and these different bullets. And then that expanded again as it went out into the committee that was established through our governance process that's supposed to be out there. In my humble opinion, and it's very humble, the strategic plan we have now is very, very good. But it was a little too broad. I say a little, I'm using quotes. It was just a little too broad, so when you want to focus your efforts so we could achieve what we wanted to achieve. It doesn't mean that some of the things under the strategic plan couldn't be done in the same way, but that they have to be the focus of the strategic plan or everyone there. Each and every one of you, every day, does great things, but does everything you do have to go into the plan? And so I thought a lot about it, and because my 4 blocks, which were just institutional vitality, community and industry connections, sustainability and opportunity innovation, it expanded out to what you saw in the strategic plan that you saw earlier today. I thought really hard about it. I thought, how do we condense it just a little bit? Next slide. Okay, that one. Okay, I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope it stays. Ooh, good. So what stood out? Student success again. You, the board, have said that over and over and over. That's important. It's what we're here for. And once we get students here, opportunity, innovation, and community and industry engagement. And somebody can say, hey, what's important to me isn't in there, but it could be. And let me give you one example. We just give a few examples right here in terms of what student success, underserved populations, retention growth, and the opportunity innovation, micro-credentials, post-COVID innovation, employee engagement, and so forth on community engagement, which we've done very well. But we need to continue. We need more. Well, what's missing? Well, I'll give you one example. Let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not there. It's very important to you. But where do you think it should go? It should go everybody. It should be in student success, and it should be in opportunity and innovation. For the students, that's where our DEI is. For our faculty and staff in our institution, it's an opportunity and innovation. How are we creating new opportunities to bring in greater diversity to our college? How are we using innovation to do it? Because everybody's doing the same thing. So if you're not working in innovative ways to do it, you can't get those people here. So that's just one example of how do these fit, or how do you take things that are important and put it in? So we can kind of condense what the focus is for the starting point for the strategic plan. So this is step one, 7 years ago and 5 years ago. This is doing it again and bringing this to you as a starting point, having a short discussion, if you'd like tonight. It's planned for the retreat to ask you. So we need to put your guidance and your vision into this to then be able to expand out and begin the planning process for the next strategic plan. Cheryl, I'll try it this time.
You're gonna do it.
All right, I did it. So what's that look like? Well, I get up and I talk to you. Here's my initial vision for the college. What are the most important things for us to focus on? And then from there, we convene various groups as we did last time, maybe a little bit differently, to be able to begin the process. But what we need from you will be, before that starts, your thoughts on, is this the starting point, the vision that you are comfortable with in terms of moving forward? And I'd like just to ask a few comments in this public venue, and we do have time to discuss more in detail at the retreat. Any thoughts, comments? Yes, sir.
In your thought process there, where do we put the general topic of finances?
I'd put them right there. Where's the opportunity to be able to do things? Everything we do is either going to have to be based on where's the opportunity, where do we make decisions for what we do. As Adam was talking about, and how we've taken funds to cover losses to then magnify our general fund, that's important. So it's just a general category so that, you know, we want to do that, or innovation. How are we going to do things differently? So it's broad category. And if we're not careful, we branch out. But that depends. You, the board, the strategic plan before the current plan did have a financial imperative in the strategic plan. And you doubled the general fund from about 3 million to 6 million when I got here in terms of that time frame, because it was extremely important to the board. So it doesn't mean that it has to be these three. My main point was trying to focus a little bit more, so when it gets out and goes through our entire process, it's a little bit more focused. You could say, I want another circle up there, or square, or whatever. That's important. That's where your thoughts need to come in, or whether or not they'll fit under these general categories. Barb first.
SUNY is very tuned into the whole diversity issue. And I'm just a little concerned that it's not articulated up there.
And it can be, but that's where I was stating, it gets articulated. I used this purposely as an example, very purposely, to say, where's diversity belong? Right here. and it belongs right here. It still becomes part of our plan, but it's trying to just focus or narrow how many imperatives we have that are there. That's all. But it can't be. You, the board, have the ability to say, I want that one on there too. Or it can be embedded and still have the same imperatives. George?
It's on the same line with equity and DEI. I like the idea. I think it should be in all three boxes. But I'm interested to see how it gets articulated.
Yeah.
I love the idea that it needs to be in all three boxes. It cannot be standalone. It'll never be successful. But how we articulate that, I think, is the question I guess I have.
And I like the way you say that because we already have a DEI strategic plan that's worked. And if you're not careful, we have strategic plan upon strategic plan upon strategic plan versus how they are embedded in from the college plan. As I talked with Carol about how does this look in terms of fitting in strategic enrollment plan, and you said, pretty good, I think. True? Untrue?
Yes.
Okay. So same thing with Sim's plan. We have a DEI strategic plan. How does it fit under these? And I like how you said it belongs in all three.
I guess I would sort of see student success as over it all.
We could do that. I kind of had that before that way. One of the reasons that I was thinking about separating it was because of some of the challenges we had within guided pathways that sort of kind of pulled away that, well, there's more than just student success. And so it was just simply, instead of putting it in the center, because we actually kind of we didn't lose the focus on it, but I thought it was always in the center. But when you add all those others around it, it kind of lost a little bit of its focus versus having it as one of the three primary elements. And quite frankly, this is not the plan. Okay, if you go back, student success was in the middle, right in the center in the last vision. But when we got done, what was the first imperative? It's about student success.
Perhaps the arrows need to point to student success versus pointing away.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Well,
yeah.
Good point, George.
I mean, visually or conceptually.
Because I could see how those can lead to.
Put it
Yes.
above all of those.
Yeah, just swap it.
I understand you're putting it first, but
Potentially, there just shouldn't be arrows there because those are each pillars unto themselves.
Okay.
Thank you. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing that strikes me about this, I haven't thought about it a lot, but is this kind of a concept would hopefully force us to talk about things in terms of their interrelationship with one another, as opposed to talking about enrollment growth in its box, and not thinking about it in terms of serving the needs of the broader community. For instance.
It helps to keep it more, I'd say it again, broken record, but it keeps it more focused on what we're trying to accomplish. So these are the overarching concepts. And then how do they, so Barb, you mentioned kind of the umbrella, I think, or Santa, and it's like, this is the umbrella. And so instead of student success being the umbrella, this would be the umbrella with all three.
So Rob, this is only our fourth
What's that?
ever, this is only our fourth ever strategic plan. And I was just struck by your comment about in the spring doing a strategic plan evaluation of the current one and closing it out and then reviewing this. I'm not sure we've ever stated it that succinctly, and I don't know what your thoughts are or if you've thought about it yet, but it would be, I think, very useful to have a very good segue, as opposed to, well, that one's over, now we're gonna start another one, which I think in the beginning was how we had to do it, because they were our first strategic plans and we didn't exactly know what we were doing. And since you did the last one and you're going into this one, I'd like to see that all that wonderful rationale that you just talked about why we need to reframe some things, be an important part of that discussion.
Okay, it can. And I hope that my initial comments about where's their continuity, and the continuity was, and you all already had it, was to maximize student success, and you already had it in your mission and vision statements, and made it clear to me when I came here that we needed to expand our presence into the community in different ways. And so those stuck, and they still are relevant today, but we all are about bringing as many students as we can here because it's a phenomenal institution, and making and helping them experience great things while they're here. And then that extends that we have a great strategic plan, I think is what you're saying, and we're segueing into a new one that has similarities, and it might be some of them are still the same, that what we want, that are what are important. What are we here for? Students. And how do we help students succeed? We have a difficult environment, and it's not going to get easier. The competition from existing educational institutions who are taking students that they never would have taken before that would come here. The competition from industry. George and I had a rambling email discussion recently about the competition from industry and how industry is starting their own training programs and things going on. And then you have the competition's going to expand with technology to bring augmented reality into anybody's home to be able to have education in much different ways. And we have to be able to be able to anticipate and react to those, and that's where part of opportunity and innovation come from. We have to continue to get even better in community and industry engagement. How many industries support our students? We've been working on that, but we don't. Others have great programs. Corning gives students in their optics program $30,000 as a bonus, pays for their school, and then they work for Corning. We're on the verge of getting that going here, but we haven't gotten there yet. But we haven't been as engaged as we needed to be. COVID killed it for a while. We're coming back. So I think what you said, though, is that you want to make sure there's a good connection and segue from to current to new.
A question? Dr. Nye, do you envision another 5-year plan that might commence in 23 and take us to 2028? What is your thought process there?
Yep, similar, unless the board has different ideas. You know, part of it is these plans, when you're at this level, unless you have an emergency, it's a slow, cumbersome process to make change. So for instance, if we're gonna have student success in the ones we have here in terms of enrollment growth, completion growth, and so forth, and Jeff, as you asked about online, what's the plan for online? It doesn't happen overnight, but if you want to say what's rapid, I'll tell you a rapid one. That's the SUNY Online, where we had almost 400 students in 3 years of starting in terms of growth. But strategic plans and getting to changing student success, getting our retention rates higher in the key metrics that the board is interested in, they don't happen overnight. If you want to take a look, it takes 3 to 5 years to really get the needle moving forward in those directions, or to get industries on board, or what does opportunity and innovation mean? That's a constant. Does that make sense, Steve?
No, it does, and I have another question with regard to as we think strategically from a succession standpoint, those key positions in the college, where that might fit in, and then the follow-up would be, are there new positions that might evolve in terms of what we look like 2, 3, 5 years from now to anticipate another key opportunity. I'm curious as to your thoughts there.
I think what you just said falls squarely under opportunity and innovation for the whole for your whole comment or what your request was, Steve. That whether it's for new positions, yes, I do perceive new positions and adjustments to positions to help us as we continue to take care of the opportunities that will emerge. For instance, high flex, where is it going? How are we going to manage the different modalities? We have more modalities now than we've ever had before. But which ones are going to emerge as being most important? We have a friction right now between people that want to go back to what it was before, folks that are going, hey, I believe in the future. And then how do you find common ground to get as many folks on board as possible? Rob and I would love to have, for instance, this isn't about personnel, but it is, that our face-to-face classes have a synchronous component, not for the face-to-face, but when students are sick, we give them absence days, or faculty can they control their classes and their not their agendas, their syllabus. Thank you. I was for having a brain cramp. Not agendas. They control the agendas, but how many excused absences do we have? So have I. I did that on purpose. But how many times can we allow a student to listen to a class synchronously when you listen to students? And one says, I had a breakfast recently before the end of the semester. I couldn't get out of my room, but I could sign on and be synchronous. Another student said, my truck broke down. I was able to log on and continue the course. You wouldn't know how many times I've heard my truck broke down. Transportation, but for real. And Deborah, you know this, when we did our last retention study, there was not one silver bullet. There were so many different reasons we lost students. But this new technology provides us a way to create greater flexibilities for students to meet their needs, but also to meet their emergencies. And that's what's been missing. So will we need people to help us in that? Yes. The chatbot, Steve, opportunity, true opportunity. The chatbot provides us an opportunity, like Sarah was saying, to really identify where students need help. But do we have enough people to be able to do a concierge type of effort to be able to help those students one-to-one? With Starfish right now, Cassie, please correct me, but we can get in Starfish and identify problems, but we don't have enough staff to have a concierge or to really get a face-to-face, hands-on help for students in a rapid manner. And if you don't help them rapidly, you lose them rapidly. And that was one of the things that Sarah mentioned. When students start to fail, they just shut down. So there's a great opportunity in my mind that we need to have a specialized group of people who support the chatbot, who are out there chasing down students face to face, going to the class, whatever, to help them. That's one example. Does that make sense, Steve?
It does. Yeah. Thank you for those answers. That's all I have for the moment.
Anything else, folks? Good, bad, ugly? Anything from the peanut gallery?
So you have an assignment for the retreat. Give some thought to this. Rob has said be focused. I'm gonna add be laser focused. Remember, we can't have 100 things in the strategic plan. We have to narrow it down to a couple of things, and please remember they have to be measurable. Okay, thank you for that very good presentation. I appreciate it. Okay, moving on. We do not have our student trustee with us yet. However, a report was submitted, and so it's in your packet for you to read. Jeff, do you have any other additional comments you'd like to make?
No, we just, the audit wrap up was it.
Board development.
Something that I'm looking into is to understand if there are any mandatory trainings that trustees have to take. So that's something that, sexual harassment, I've read that sometimes you do and sometimes you don't, it depends. So that's just something that, in regards to board development, I just wanna understand more if there are any, or if sexual harassment, for example, is one mandatory training that we have to take.
So very good question.
Donna, did you want to add anything?
No, I just, when I saw your email, I also agree with Joan, it's a very good question, I don't know the answer to that.
So we'll find out.
Association, Barb, do you have anything from the association? No. Alright. Foundation, Lewis, of course, gave a very good presentation, you know where we are. If you haven't bought a ticket for the golf ball draft, I'm sure he'll sell you one. And that's correct?
Yes, they're not looking.
Okay. And, Donna, do you have anything that you wanna do with NYCCT tonight?
I just wanna let you know that this Saturday, I'm attending a strategic planning retreat for NYCCT in Hudson Valley.
Oh, excellent. Okay, great. And you'll give a report.
And I will
on
give
that.
you a report out. So if anybody has any thoughts about what would be useful for you as a trustee here, that the state could help with, please let me know.
Steve has his hand up.
I'm sorry, what?
Steve, looks like Steve might
Oh,
have a
I'm
question.
sorry, Steve, you have your hand up? Steve, where
No,
are you?
I'm all set. That was previous. I'm all set. Thanks.
Just waving at it.
Student corporation liaison, anything from student corp, probably not, right, all right, it's still summer. Does anybody have any other questions, comments, announcements? All right, if there are none, I will ask for us to, adjourn, for a motion to go into executive session. And, following the executive session, we will return to regular session. And tonight, we're going into executive session to discuss matters regarding collective negotiation pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. So Barb, you moved, George second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We'll move into executive session and then we'll return to, regular session to adjourn.
This is where I start my job.
Yes. Yeah, you have to fill out all those.
No, he's gonna
Just wanna make sure I was in the
go
game.
back to the meeting.
Did
Yeah.
you get the form?
Executive session we're in now.
All right, boss.
Do you have the
Did you
form?
get your form?
He will.
What are you talking about?
Do you have a form for Rich to put all the information you need for the executive session?
I got it.
Yeah, we can get out of this one.